What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we're just going to be going over why I'm getting rid of my side-by-side and going back to an ATV. So for most of you that have stuck around the channel, you would know that prior to this side-by-side, I used to have a 2019 Kawasaki Brute Force 750. Now, I really enjoyed that ATV. I've actually enjoyed riding ATVs my whole life. My family enjoys riding ATVs. But because so many people out there have been shifting to the side-by-side market, I wanted to see what it was all about. So I went ahead and I sold my Kawasaki Brute Force 750 and I bought this Honda Talon. Now, this is the 2020 Honda Talon 1000 X4. I've done a lot of modifications to it. It has been fun. But we don't ride this side-by-side as much as we used to ride our ATVs. And the reason why is because this is a much bigger machine compared to an ATV. So it doesn't fit on a lot of the trails that we're used to riding with our ATVs. So that's really the number one reason that this machine has slowed us down from using it, is just there's no really good places locally to ride this big of a machine. So again, for example, one of the biggest and best places to take your side-by-side would be Hatfield and McCoy's, but that's like a 5-hour drive from me. Another place that's pretty decently sized, but obviously not as big as Hatfield and McCoy's, is maybe about an hour to an hour and a half from me. So no matter where I would go, any place that I could take this and have plenty of space to actually ride it, enjoy it, is a pretty decent distance of traveling. So I'd have to have a trailer, I'd have to travel, and with my schedule at work and with my kids' schedules with school and all their activities, we just didn't have a whole lot of time to travel to use this. Number two, back to the size, it's a very large machine and all three of my kids are uncomfortable driving it. So they just aren't comfortable riding it. So now, instead of my kids driving and enjoying the outdoors, they're primarily just passengers now. And they do have fun when we go out, but because we're not actually riding it as much anymore, they don't get to really experience the outdoor off-road world as much as they used to. And number three, it's very expensive. These side-by-sides are well over $20,000, even upwards of $30,000. So typically they cost a ton of money and they usually have a much higher payment, which is sometimes more than the cost of the vehicle you're probably driving every day. And this doesn't get used as often. So those are really the three main reasons. Other than that, it is a beast of a machine. It is fun to drive. It's just not very convenient to use on a regular basis. So we decided we're going to be selling it. So I have a few people interested in buying it. So we decided we're going to pick up another ATV again because everybody enjoys riding it around the house, around the yard, around the fields, around my house. And we just get much more use out of an ATV, which leads me to the new addition to the garage, which is the 2019 Suzuki King Quad 750 AXI SE. Now, this is the 2019 version that kicked off the whole new list of upgrades that Suzuki has brought to the King Quad starting in 2019. Now, there's a long list to go over. I'm not going to get into too much of the specs, but I'll try to go over some of the basics. They have redesigned the frame and chassis of this ATV to make it a little bit stronger and better handling and less flex and so forth. It does come with new A-arms for increased handling. There is an updated engine on here, which is the 722cc dual overhead cam single cylinder liquid cooled 4-stroke engine, which is definitely really good. And when paired with Suzuki's new Quadmatic CVT automatic transmission, which Suzuki is well known for having a top of the line CVT transmission, this ATV has a lot of power. It also comes with the new larger diameter gas shocks with preload adjustments, which really helps you adjust the stability and travel of your ATV depending on the type of riding you do. They do bring back the handlebar headlight. It does include a trailer hitch on the back now, right like that. And they've opened up this area here so you can get access to all of your fluids for easy maintenance and changing of your fluids. They have redesigned the body to give it a little bit more of an aggressive look with the angles here. So it does look a lot more aggressive now compared to some of the older body styles. And I gotta say, this machine is awesome. Now, because it is a single cylinder engine compared to some of the V-twins out there, the center portion right here is a little bit more narrower, which I like because coming from a Brute Force 750 myself, switching over to the King Quad, having a slightly more narrow seat right here and having that allows me to squeeze my legs up against the tank a little bit and gives me a little bit more control over the machine, which again, maybe it's not a big deal to most people, but it does make a small difference. But overall, I really like this new bronze color. It looks awesome. Now I did buy this used and I got a really good deal on it, so it was too good to pass up. The guy already put aftermarket wheels on here, which are really nice, and they complement the bronze look of the body panels here. Now these are 14-inch rims and these are 26-inch tires. So the tires are basically like new. He did have a little rack welded to the back, so I just used a grinder wheel and grinded off a couple of spots, but not a big deal because I plan on taking this back rack off eventually anyways, sanding it down and repowder coating it. Up here on the front rack here, still pretty nice. These are steel racks, very sturdy, very supportive. Now there are some scuffs up here on the rack because the guy I bought it from had this Boss audio system here that was mounted on the front that was strapped up here. So because it just kind of shifted around, it kind of scuffed up some of the coating here. But again, not a big deal. I'll eventually take off the front rack, get it sanded down and repowder coated. I did go ahead and add these Copen double gun racks here because I usually am working around the yard and I'm carrying shovels and rakes and whatever not. Sometimes I'm carrying a gun, but I usually also add a much bigger light bar across the bottom here, and I zip tie it up under here, which I usually have right here. So it's a little bit of a bigger light bar here that I'll add on here very shortly, so stay tuned for that. But overall, this does have the electronic power steering. Now, the newer King Quads do come in multiple different levels. You could get them without power steering. You can get them with power steering. But some of the higher SC and SE Plus models, you're not gaining a whole lot besides some specific color body panels and some decals and a few other things. So if you are looking at the 2019 or newer King Quads, I would at least recommend going up to the model that has the power steering because it does make a pretty significant difference when riding. But I will say this, in previous years growing up, I've had quads all my life. I never had power steering. It was not a big deal. It was only a couple years ago when I switched over to the Brute Force 750 and I had power steering. That was my first ATV with power steering, and I love it. It just makes zipping around the woods and tight trails a lot easier to steer, and I really like it. So if anything, if you're out there shopping around and you're looking, I would at least recommend going with a power steering model because it does make steering a lot more easier. But overall, everything's been redesigned. It has a really nice aggressive look. I actually think because of these angles here on the fender, it actually resembles a Brute Force 750s. Now, it does not come with a bumper. You can add aftermarket bumpers to this, so just keep that in mind. It doesn't come with a bumper. Coming up over here, this right here is not a gas tank, it's storage. You basically just open this up and it's just basically stick your hand in here and there's like a pocket in there for storage. So that's what that is. I do have a switch here because the original owner had a switch here to a smaller LED light, which is right here, but I took it off because I like using this much bigger one here. So he already had it wired into this switch. All I did was disconnect everything, and then I'm gonna go ahead and reconnect my light bar to that later. Let's see, coming around over this side here. Again, this is the 750 AXI. Again, it has nice deep floorboards here to collect a lot of the mud, which is nice because in the Brute Force, the plastic footwell here was like level right here, okay? So what happens is when you got a lot of mud on your feet, it got really muddy in here and it just made my feet slip around. These have deeper footwells here that can collect a lot more mud and dirt, and you have a little bit more room to kind of push down on your brake. So that's your rear brake right there. Speaking of brakes are still pretty good. I think they've been redesigned a little bit for 2019. The rear brake is still so-so. It's not, I mean, most ATVs, the rear brake is not awesome. But the front brakes, really good. I really, really like the front brakes. And just so you know, over here on the left, that's a back brake too. So you can actually activate the back brake with the foot lever or the left lever over here. The right lever is your front brake, but I primarily just use the front brake because it just has so much more stopping power. And if you think about a motorcycle, that like 70% of your stopping power is your front brake. It's no different when it comes to ATVs. Your front brakes are gonna give you so much more stopping power. But if you can, try to use both of them equally if you can for added stopping power. Come over here, you got some nice brake lights in the back. You have this little tab lifted up, have a little bit more storage down in here, which is kind of cool. Okay, but overall, if you look down here, everything is nice and clean. I mean, this quad is really clean. It did have a little crack right here in the fender, not a big deal. I'm just gonna JB weld that from the back, so I'm not too concerned with that. But again, for the deal I got on this, I'm not gonna complain. I did go ahead and put a new battery in. I did that the other day. Speaking of, this does have a latch on the back, which is nice. Okay, I like having ATVs that have a latch on the back because some ATVs just have a seat that just plugs into these little plug holes. I like having the latch. But again, I did just put a brand new battery in. I got that from the Suzuki dealership. It did cost a little bit more, so just be aware of that. These do take unique batteries. Here's the old battery in here that the previous owner replaced. So again, this is not a factory battery. This is just a basic cheap Amazon type battery, but it is the 20 CH-BS. This is the battery you're going to need for this quad. It's a very unique size battery because it's so small. So just keep in mind, when you're looking for a new battery, you need a 20 CH-BS. Again, these right here are probably $60 on Amazon. A lot of these batteries, you have to add the acid in and charge it yourself. I got this from a dealership. It did cost a little bit more, about twice the cost of that, but they charged it and sealed it at the dealership for me and it was ready to go. And that's what I have in there now. So again, nice strong battery. I did add a battery tender to it as well, which I just have the wire tucked up under here, which I just reach under here and grab it, sitting right here. So that right there is tied to my battery. So when I plug it in, I just have my battery tender sitting over here. Okay, and I could just plug it in the winter months. Because again, in Western Pennsylvania, my garage is insulated, but it's not heated. And when it's 0 or 10 degrees outside, it gets cold. And I always recommend using a battery tender to keep your batteries at optimal condition. But overall, everything else works good. Let me hop on and show you. Things are slightly different here. You have a 12-volt outlet over here for plugging in, external lights and cigarette lighters or whatever you want to do over here. Here's your switch right here. Again, you have off, on, light, and then auxiliary lights. So your regular light here is your headlights up front, up here. The auxiliary light here is this light right here. So that's what those 4 switches are. Over here, you're gonna have your gear shifter. All the way up is low, next is high, then there's neutral, then reverse. I don't really care for this shift gate here because it has this like zigzag pattern. It's a little bit harder to kind of like find the gear and work all the way down. I think there's an aftermarket one out there. I'm gonna have to find it and try it, which just is designed and cut to be a little bit smoother. So either way, not a big deal. It works perfectly fine. It's just not as easy to use when you're not paying attention to it. You got your lights up here, you got your start button, you have your on-off kill switch right here, you have your override button. It does have your lock brake right here, so it's like a parking brake. You're gonna squeeze this in like that, pull this forward, lock it just like that. As soon as you let go, it pops open, you're good to go. Over here, push 4-wheel drive. It's not a switch. Right now it's 2-wheel drive, but if I push it in, it's 4-wheel drive. What's also nice about this is it has a locking differential, which is super easy to use. You're basically just gonna push your 4-wheel drive in and flip the switch up, and now you're locked into differential lock. So that's super easy to use there. Throttle feels really good. Everything feels really good. The display looks pretty good. Okay, so again, you have a nice display here that tells you everything. So again, you can change a few of the settings here by just hitting this button over here, going through a couple things. So nothing major, just like a trip meter in your time. And then you can use this button over here to change some of the settings. Another thing I like about this ATV is I'm a taller guy with longer arms. So I like to have my handlebars tilted forward more because by factory, they're sitting back here more, which puts my hands down a little bit too low and too close to me. So very simple. You take these 2 bolts out right here, one there, one there. A couple push pins. You got one on the side right here, and then one on the side over here, right there. And then there's one push pin under here. You take those 3 push pins out, take those 2 bolts out, this whole thing pops off, then you'll have access to your handlebar risers. There's 4 bolts at the riser, but if you just loosen the 2 front ones, which are very easy to get to, you could slide your handlebars forward, tighten it back down, put it all back in, and now my handlebars are a little bit more forward, they're a little bit more upright, and they feel much better for me being a taller rider with longer arms. I really like that. So overall, that's pretty much it for the Suzuki King Quad 750. Now, again, some of you might be wondering why I didn't go back to another brute force, and there's a couple reasons why. I love the brute force 750. It is a beast. The V-twin engine, I gotta say, it's so powerful with a ton of torque. However, there were some things about the Brute Force 750 that I didn't really care about, that I actually like better on the King Quad. So on the Brute Force, I found that the throttle was a little jumpy, and it's probably because of the torque, or maybe they just don't have a smoother transmission compared to the King Quad, but it just felt very jumpy, and my kids and my wife just hated that. It just was really jumpy and hard for them to kind of comfortably steer without always jerking the quad. So that was number one. Number two, the Brute Force chewed up gas like it was nothing. I mean, it is a V-twin. My kids would be riding it every day in the summer and riding around the woods. I was putting gas in that thing left and right. This King Quad 750 is a single cylinder engine, tons of power, tons of torque, but gas mileage is going to be much better on the King Quad. I like that the King Quad feels a little bit more comfortable in the seating position. And now that the new 2019 models look more aggressive, it looks just like a Brute Force to me. So as far as looks go, I really like the look of the King Quad now. Now, as far as throttle and speed, the King Quad has an awesome CVT transmission, and the throttle is so buttery smooth. There's no jerkiness. Now, I will say this, if you're coming from a Brute Force to a King Quad like me, you're gonna get on the King Quad and immediately feel like this is not that powerful, because on the Brute Force, you have that lower end torque that makes it feel snappier. This one's a little bit more smoother, so you don't have that increased low-end torque as the Brute Force. Now, the 2019 models did change a few things to give you a little bit more low-end torque, and there are some aftermarket modifications you can do to this quad, such as going in there and adding the shims in the clutch basket, because what I've read about doing the modification of adding some shims in your clutch basket, you will gain a little bit of lower end torque, but you will lose a few miles per hour off the top end. We'll look into that another day, but I have considered doing that as well. But overall, the quad is still very fast. It has a ton of power. It's just more smooth and not as jumpy and torquey as the Brute Force. So my wife and kids love the King Quad. It's a lot easier and smoother for them to drive. The King Quad still has plenty of torque. There's not a huge difference between the Brute Force 750 and the newer 2019 and above Suzuki King Quad 750s, except for a little bit of torque. Now, yes, a Brute Force will probably beat a King Quad 750 on a straightaway race. I've seen all the videos out there, but if you watch them, it's only beating the King Quad by 5 or 10 feet. But keep in mind, 99% of us are not out drag racing quads on the strip. We're in the woods flying around on trails. And when you're flying around on trails, winding through the trees, they're all going to be going the same speed. You're not going to worry about that couple extra miles per hour or that 5 or 10 foot lead in a race when you're flying through the woods. So again, if you're buying a quad specifically to race your friends and show off and be the most powerful and the fastest, then maybe the Brute Force 750 might be the way to go. But if you want a quad that's pretty much great at everything, and it comes with the reliability that Suzuki is known for, I actually put Suzuki and Honda on the same level. Everybody knows the Hondas last forever. Me personally, I put Suzuki up there with Honda. They're known for reliability. So if you want a quad that's going to pretty much check all the boxes and come with the reliability, definitely make sure you check out the Suzuki King Quad 750. Now again, this is a 2019 model, so again, if you're going with an older model, you're still going to get a lot of the reliability and good features. But the 2019's got a complete overhaul through Suzuki with a lot of new features. So if you are looking for a used quad, I'd tell you to go check out the 2019 or newer Suzuki King Quad 750s and try to get one with electronic power steering, because you're going to love it. So again, I'm really happy with this decision. Again, I do like the side-by-sides. We just don't ride it enough to make sense to have it, because again, you have to have a trailer. This can fit in the bed of a pickup. That won't. So you have to have a big enough trailer to tow it and haul it everywhere. And you're primarily towing it and hauling it to places to even be able to ride it. With a quad, I could take it anywhere and ride it anywhere. And that's why I'm getting rid of my side-by-side and I'm going back to the ATV, because it just feels funner to me. I like to be in the outdoors. I like to feel like I'm part of nature. I like to whip around the woods and the trails and feel like I am immersed into that situation. I just don't get the same feeling when I'm riding a side-by-side. When I'm riding a side-by-side, I feel like I'm just in a small car or a Jeep just riding through the woods. It doesn't give me the same experience. And I really just feel like I enjoy riding an ATV more than I do riding a side-by-side. So that's my main reason for getting rid of the side-by-side and going to the ATV. But overall, my initial impressions of the 2019 redesigned King Quad 750s. Again, this is the AXI SE model. I definitely give it a thumbs up. I give it a go. This quad is awesome, and I have no regrets moving from the Brute Force 750 over to the King Quad 750. I'm really happy with the decision I made because this new revised King Quad is awesome. Okay, so we're just gonna go for a quick little ride up here through the woods. I always come up here and just do donuts up here in the field. Again, I'm trying to drive this with one hand, but you can see just by driving it with one hand, the power steering makes driving through the woods so much easier because I'm able to do it with one hand. Let's go ahead and shut this off. Okay, so we just came to a stop and I shut the ATV off. I just wanted to show you how it starts. So again, very simple. You got to make sure you're in neutral. Turn your key to on. You can turn it all the way if you want your headlights on, but turn it to at least on. And then just make sure your kill switch is in the on position here because the X means off. Once it's on the on position, hit start. You're good to go. Now you can put it in gear and you're good to go. So it's very simple. Okay, everybody, so there you go. So that right there is the introduction to my 2019 Suzuki King Quad 750 AXI SE Plus. It's an awesome ATV. I actually prefer it over the Brute Force 750 now that I've been driving it. I actually enjoy driving ATVs more than my side-by-side, which is why I'll probably be getting rid of my side-by-side. I just have more fun on an ATV because it's just a lot more nimble. I could go through a lot of the tighter trails that side-by-sides can't fit in. I could really just kind of whip it and overall just have more fun. So there you go. So that's the main reason why I'm getting rid of my side-by-side and I went back to an ATV and why I have chosen the King Quad over the Brute Force. So I hope this video helps some of you out. If you're out there searching around trying to determine whether you want a side-by-side or an ATV, or if you're looking at an ATV and you're torn between the Brute Force and the King Quad, me personally, I like the King Quad more now that I've owned it and been driving it. So that's my 2 cents there. So I hope this video helps some of you out. Do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button and like this video. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments section and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And also do me a favor, subscribe to the channel because it definitely helps me out and I greatly appreciate it. So that's it. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you. I truly appreciate you all. And as always, see you in the next video.